This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your business.
I mean, that's the least scared I ever been, man. It's like a romantic comedy.
It's like a lullaby, dog. Stupid.
Yeah.
You know, it's lazy storytelling.
Yes.
Jordan Peele is a director who possesses a true love of genre, especially the horror genre. His films have used genre as a structural framework, which are filled in with satirical stories that explore wider themes, ideas, and issues in society, told through the eyes of his protagonists. Telling stories in such a bold, direct manner that at times challenge and poke at the audience's own insecurities and deep-set fears has sometimes meant that his films have gotten polarized reactions. In this video, I'll explore the work of Jordan Peele by looking at 3 films that he's directed at 3 increasing budget levels: the low budget Get Out, the medium budget Us, and the high budget Nope, to unpack the methodology behind his filmmaking and his career. From his background in sketch comedy, Peele transitioned to another genre for his debut feature film.
I think horror and comedy are very similar. In one, you're trying to get a laugh, in the other, you're trying to get a scare.
Both genres rely on careful pacing, writing, reveals, and filmmaking gags that are used to invoke an emotional response from the audience. He also brought his appreciation for direct satire and social commentary from sketches into the horror screenplay. In fact, some of the films that inspired him were stories written by Ira Levine, like The Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, built around the horror genre and underpinned with a satirical commentary on society.
Those movies were both extremely inspiring because what they did within the thriller genre was this very delicate tightrope walk. Every step into weird town that those movies makes, it doesn't equal, there's an equal effort to justify why the character doesn't run screaming. That sort of dance between showing something weird and over the top and then showing how easily it can be placed with how weird reality is, that's the technique I brought to Get Out.
Justifying the actions of the characters so that the audience does not question the decisions that they make is particularly important in the horror genre, or any genre that incorporates elements of the supernatural into a story. Slowly backing the characters up into a corner until they have no escape is what creates the necessary suspenseful environment. He pitched the script to Blumhouse Productions, who have a track record of producing low-budget horror films under the $6 million mark, that they are later able to get wide studio releases for that catapult them to financial success due to the wide commercial audience for horror. It was through Blumhouse that he was connected with DP Toby Oliver, who had previously shot other films for the production company.
It began as the fun of a horror story. In the middle of the process, it turned into something more important. The power of story is that it is one of the few ways we can really feel empathy and encourage empathy. When you have a protagonist, the whole trick is bring the audience into that protagonist's eyes.
Peele puts us in the character's shoes through the way that he structures almost all of his stories around a central protagonist. He also uses the placement of the camera, how it moves, and the overall cinematography to make us see the world from the point of view of the main character. Oliver lit most of the film in a natural way, presenting the world to the audience in the same way that the protagonist would see it.
My pitch to him was that I thought the movie should have a really quite a naturalistic feel, not too crazy with the sort of horror conventions in terms of the way it looks. Maybe not until the very end of the movie that we sort of go towards that territory a little bit more, with the more sort of stylized lighting and camera angles.
Instead, the camera often tracked with the movement of the protagonist, or stayed still when he was still. They also shot some POV shots as if the camera literally was capturing what the character was seeing, or used over-the-shoulder shots that angled the frame to be a close assimilation of the actor's point of view. This framing technique, combined with a widescreen aspect ratio, also stacks the image so that there are different planes within the frame.
So, I mean, what I love to do generally as a DP is always have story elements, if you can, in the foreground and midground and background. So you've got to, when you're looking through the frame, there's depth that's telling you something more about the characters or the stories as you look through it.
One of the challenges that came with the film's low budget was an incredibly tight 23-day shooting schedule. To counter this, they did a lot of planning about how the film would be covered before production started, which included Peele drawing up storyboards for any complicated scenes, and walking through the scenes in the house location and taking still photos of each shot they needed to get, which Oliver then converted into a written shot list. They shot Get Out using 2 Alexa Minis and 3.2K ProRes to speed up the coverage of scenes, using Angenieux Optimo zoom lenses instead of primes, which also helped with the quick framing and setup time that was needed. Overall, Get Out was crafted in its writing as a contained satirical horror film, shot with limited locations, fairly uncomplicated considered cinematography through the eyes of its protagonist, and pulled off on the low budget by shooting on a compressed schedule with pre-planned lighting diagrams and shot lists. This video was made possible thanks to our sponsor Squarespace. You can't run a business these days without a website, and because as a filmmaker you are your business, you can't be without one. You need an online presence for clients to browse your work, a page to bring all your social accounts together, and a contact point for collaborators to reach you. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that you can use to easily create a stylish and functional website. It has great tools such as a members area for generating private content for your audience, libraries to display your creative work, and blogging tools which I use to categorize, schedule, and integrate my YouTube videos with an article on my Squarespace site. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or domain.
It really is a movie that was made with a fairly clear social statement in mind, but it's also a movie that I think is best when it's personalized. It's a movie about the duality of mankind, and it's a movie about our fear of invasion, of the other, of the outsider, and the revelation that we are our own worst enemy.
Building on the massive financial success of Get Out, Peele's follow-up film took on a larger scope story that demanded an increased budget. Again, Blumhouse Productions came on board to produce, this time with an estimated budget of $20 million. Like Get Out, Us was also written as a genre film, this time leaning more into the slasher subgenre of horror.
I think what people are going to find in Us is that, much like in Get Out, I'm inspired by many different subgenres of horror. I really tried to make something that incorporates what I love about those and sort of steps into its own new subgenre.
This time, Peele hired Michael Giolakos to shoot the project, a cinematographer who'd worked in the horror and thriller genre for directors such as M. Night Shyamalan and David Robert Mitchell. One of the early challenges that they faced in pre-production was a scheduling one. Because they had 4 leads, who each had a doppelganger in the movie, and changing between shots with those doppelgangers required hours of hair and makeup work, they needed to precisely plan each shot.
Because you can never shoot a scene like you normally would, where you shoot this side and then shoot the other side. We ended up actually boarding pretty much the whole movie. It's kind of really helped us to isolate who would be seen in which shot, in which scene, and then when we could move that around and structure our day accordingly with the costume and makeup changes.
The actors would arrive on set and do a blocking from both sides of the character. When shooting, they then used a variety of doubles and stand-ins who would take up one of the doppelganger's positions so that the actor had an eye line to play to. They would shoot the scene from one of the character's perspectives and then usually come back the next day and do the other side of the scene. For some wider shots, they left the camera in the same position, shot one shot with one character, one empty plate shot without the characters, and one shot with the character in new makeup. Or they would shoot the scene with a double and did a face replacement in post-production. Not only was continuity very important for this, but also the lighting setups had to remain consistent between shots.
I like the idea of heightened realism in lighting, like a raw, naturalistic look, just a little bit of a slightly surreal look to the light.
A great example of this idea can be seen in the opening sequence inside the Hall of Mirrors, where he used soft, low-level LED light blade 1Ks with a full grid chimera diffusion to cast a cyan light to give a more surreal feeling to what should be darkness. Like in all of his work, Peele cinematographers often play with a contrast between warm and cool light, and the connotations that warm light during the day is comforting and safe, and bluer light at night is colder, more scary, and dangerous. This isn't always the case, but generally in his films, Peele paces moments of comforting characterization during the day with moments of darker terror at night. One of the trickier sequences involved shooting on a lake at night. Instead of going the usual route of mimicking moonlight, the DP created a nondescript key tungsten source, punctuated by some lights off in the background to break up the darkness. His gaffer put a 150-foot condor on either side of the lake, with 3 24 light dinos on each condor to key the scene. They then put up a row of 1Ks and sodium vapor lights as practicals in the background. The film was shot with an Alexa and master primes on the 27mm and 32mm for about 90% of the film. He exposed everything using a single LUT that had no color cast at the low end, which rendered more neutral, darker skin tones. Us was shot over a longer production schedule that accommodated for double shooting scenes with the leads, stunt scenes, bigger set design builds, and digital post-production work by Industrial Light and Magic.
First and foremost, I wanted to make a UFO horror film. And then, of course, it's like, where is the iconic black UFO film? And whenever I feel that there's my favorite movie out there that hasn't been made, that's the void I'm trying to fill with my films. It's like trying to make the film that I wish someone would make for me.
For his next, larger budget endeavor, he turned to the UFO subgenre with a screenplay that was larger in scope than his previous films, due to its large action and stunt set pieces and increased visual effects work. Even though it was a bigger movie, the way in which he told and structured the story is comparable to his other work in a few ways. One, it was written as a genre film based on horror with offshoots of other subgenres. 2, it was told over a compressed time period using relatively few locations. 3, it featured a small lead cast and told the story directly through the eyes of his protagonist. With a larger story and a larger budget came the decision from esteemed high-budget cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema to shoot the film in a larger format.
So I talked to Hoyt. Obviously, scope was a big thing, and I wanted to push myself. And I asked him, how would you capture actual UFO? What camera would you use? And that's what we should use in the movie, both in the movie and in the meta way. And he said, the IMAX camera.
So the decision was made that to create an immersive, otherworldly, large-scope cinema experience, they would shoot on a combination of 15 perf large format IMAX on Hasselblad lenses and 5 perf 65mm with Panavision Sphero 65 glass. They stuck to IMAX as much as they could, but had to use Panavision System 65 for any intimate dialogue scenes because the IMAX camera's very noisy mechanics that pass the film through the camera make recording clean sync sound impossible. They shot the daytime scenes on 65mm Kodak 250D and dark interiors and night scenes on Kodak 500T. They also used Kodak 50D to capture the aerial footage. He developed the film at its box speed without pushing or pulling it to ensure they achieved maximum color depth and contrast ranges without any exaggerated film grain. The most challenging scene for any cinematographer to light is a night exterior in a location which doesn't have any practical lights to motivate lighting from. Unlike the night exteriors in Us, which were keyed with tungsten units from an imagined practical source, Van Hoytema chose to instead try to simulate the look of moonlight. There are two ways that this is conventionally done. The first is shooting day for night, where the scene is captured during the day under direct sunlight, which is made to look like moonlight using a special camera LUT. The second way is to shoot at night and use a large, high output source rigged up in the air to illuminate a part of the exterior set. However, the larger the area that requires light, the more difficult this becomes. Van Hoytema came up with the innovative third method that he'd previously used to photograph the large exterior lunar sequences on Ad Astra. He used a decommissioned 3D rig that allowed two cameras to be mounted and customized it so that both cameras were perfectly aligned and shot the same image. He then attached a custom Arri Alexa 65 which had an infrared sensor that captured skies shot in daylight as dark. A Panavision 65 camera was mounted to capture the same image but in full color. In that way, they shot two images during the day that they could combine, using the digital infrared footage from the Alexa 65 to produce dark-looking skies and pull the color from the film negative of the Panavision 65. This gave the night sequences a filmic color combined with a background which looked like it was lit with moonlight and allowed the audience to see in the dark.
Shooting on IMAX brings its whole own set of challenges to the set. So for somebody that hasn't shot on IMAX, you definitely bump yourself out of a comfort zone. By doing tests, it became very evident very early that the advantages by far outweigh the disadvantages or the nuisances,
While maintaining many of the story and filmmaking principles from his prior films, Nope was pulled off on a much larger budget that allowed them to shoot in the more expensive large format, with more money dedicated to post-production, stunts, and large action sequences that the bigger scope script required. Jordan Peele's filmic sensibilities that value genre, stories which contain broader social commentary, told with a limited cast and limited locations through the sympathetic eyes of its central protagonist, have remained the same throughout his career as a writer and director. What has changed is the scope of the stories he tells. Each new film he's made has seen increasingly bigger set pieces, more complex action scenes, and larger set builds, which are captured by more expensive filmmaking techniques. This increase in scope is what has influenced each bump up in budget, all the way from his beginnings as a low-budget horror filmmaker to directing a massive Hollywood blockbuster. Thanks to everyone for watching, and a special thanks to all the supporters of the channel on Patreon that make this possible. Let me know down in the comments what other directors you'd like to see featured in this series. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.